Hello, my name is Elissa Weinzimmer. I'm the founder of Voice Body Connection and a vocal health educator. And this video is part of my online class, How Your Voice Works. I'm really excited to be welcoming Claudia Friedlander today to have an interview. I wanted to ask Claudia to join me today because Claudia is a voice teacher who specializes in working with singers, opera singers, and singers of all walks, and also has this wonderful specialty in fitness and as a personal trainer. And so today we're going to talk about how singers and also voice users in general can optimize their fitness routines so it is more optimal for our voice use. So Claudia, welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your background and what brought you to this place? And I'm sure everyone would love to hear why fitness and singing combined.
Okay, well, I've been a voice teacher for many years. I've been teaching through my private studio in New York pretty much since I completed my doctorate back in 1999. And as soon as I started working with really high-level singers, one of the things that I noticed was that where just nitty-gritty things involving technique were concerned, I had the tools that I needed to be able to teach singing to my students. But where things like alignment, breathing, stamina, balance, that you need for stage movement are concerned. These are all so important for singing performance. And I did not have the tools to be able to just get my students to stand up straight and take a deep breath. So I started looking around to see where I might be able to develop those tools. And I ended up working as a fitness trainer in gyms in the New York area for about 2 years. And it was a great experience because I learned so much about motor learning, about the way that anatomy functions globally, but most important, I learned about what elite athletes refer to as sport-specific training. If you want to get really good at a sport, it's possible to devise very specific regimens to be able to optimize your body to have peak performance in that sport. And I thought, well, if you're a vocal athlete, what would that be? For peak performance as a singer, what do you need your body to be able to do? And so I became very interested in how to adapt these fitness tools that I was learning for use in the voice studio so that I could help singers really optimize their bodies for this very athletic task of singing.
Awesome. Such a cool history and obviously very important and something I think we need to be talking about too. I talk a lot about alignment in How Your Voice Works. And so I guess the first question then to ask you is, what do singers need to know about their fitness routine?
Well,
it's a big question.
There are some things that are common to all athletes, like having good alignment, a program to resolve whatever postural distortions you may have developed just over the course of daily living, because we all pick these things up. Whatever you do with your body all day long is going to affect the way you hold yourself. And so even if you are very athletic and very active, if you're spending long periods of time sitting and studying, looking at a computer, you may end up with a postural distortion that looks a little bit like this. And then when it's time for you to need full access to range of motion in your shoulders, you may find that they want to move more in one direction than another. So all athletes need to have some basic conditioning program that's going to restore them to good, well-balanced alignments such that the musculature governing the spine and all the major joints comes back into balance. So that's something that singers have in common with athletes of all stripes. Some of the other things that we really need to focus on are good cardiorespiratory health. If you are able to make good use of oxygen, this is why athletes train at altitude, because you get really good at consuming as much oxygen as possible. Then you're going to have the stamina to be able to sing really long phrases or get through a really long performance. Again, this isn't something that we necessarily develop by default, but there are certain ways that you can tweak your cardio program that will really boost your stamina. So that's important.
Great.
And I feel that it's also very important for singers to develop a good sense of balance and stabilization. Stabilizing your core makes it possible for you to have really great control over whatever it is you're doing to manage your breath when you're singing. Stabilizing your joints through movement means that you're going to be able to access the best qualities of your vocal technique, even if you've got a lot of crazy stage management to execute, or you've got to run up and down on a raked stage, or you've got a costume or a character that requires you to hold yourself in a particular way while you're performing. If you are able to really stabilize movement, stabilize your breathing, then you're going to be able to access the very best of your technique while you're performing.
Great. Really well said. That's great. And in when I'm talking about alignment, I often say that alignment is the ability to track weight or forces through our skeletal system and our connective tissue. Because I think what happens so very often for singers, for anyone really, is that our musculature starts getting recruited to hold us up posturally, and we're just overusing our muscles. And ultimately, I mean, we can talk more about this as we go along, but sound is vibration, right? Our voice is vibration. And so any holding, any rigidity in the body is going to dampen the vibration. And so we want as much freedom as possible in our routine, which actually, I guess what I'm driving towards is, are there certain types of exercise then that are best for singers and voice users, and maybe some that are contraindicative, just because, like for instance, I'm thinking about weightlifters, right? Like weightlifters, the goal actually is to get a lot of the muscles all over the body into a state of contraction, so that we, see the beautiful outline of all of that musculature. But if we're thinking about voice, that might actually dampen some of the sound if we're in a state of contraction in the muscles all throughout our body. So what would you say are some of the most optimal ways to exercise, and maybe things we need to avoid?
Well, I'll answer that, but first I just want to express my appreciation for the way that you go about defining and describing alignment, because I think that's super important for singers as well. Before I learned as much as I know about fitness, I read all the pedagogy books, and there are usually beautiful pictures of what ideal alignment is supposed to look like.
Right.
And you look at these pictures and you think, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, I'm supposed to make myself look like that. And I think that a lot of singers think that they're just supposed to find like the right way to hold themselves, and then their instrument is going to function well. But you just pointed out, that if there's any rigidity, any holding, that's really going to impact the way that the vibrations pass through your bones and tissue. It's going to affect your own comfort while having the freedom to sing, the freedom to move while you're doing this. So I view alignment as being a very dynamic thing. And what you said, I really liked your definition of this. So if your goal is to be able to produce a lot of force, the way that bodybuilders sometimes do, or even like Olympic powerlifters, then you're really just moving through a couple of planes of motion to accomplish a very specific task. Whereas what you're doing as a singer or performer is much more like 360, be able to move in all directions. So if you're going to do strength training, it's important to do it in a way that has you continually moving through all planes of motion rather than just back and forth. You can use strength training to develop tremendous power, and you can even probably get to the point where you've got something approximating the kind of muscle definition that you may admire in some of the gym rats that you see. But if you are able to do strength training exercises in an environment that requires you to stabilize yourself, in an environment that challenges your sense of balance, then you're going to promote this dynamic alignment, this ability to respond to gravity in all directions with your spine, with your joints. An example would be, if, say, I want to work on my legs, I want to improve the strength of my legs. Well, if I do a one-legged squat, so that I have to maintain my balance while I'm going up and down, then that is going to require my hips to stabilize themselves. It's going to require a lot of flexibility and awareness throughout my spine as I'm going up and down. Whereas if I'm sitting on a leg press, these very rigid selectorized machines you sometimes see in the gym, and I'm just like pushing back and forth in one plane of motion, well, I might build a lot of strength and bulk in specific muscles in my legs, but I'm not doing anything to make sure that the joints, my ankles, my knees, my hips, and the whole lumbopelvic hip complex and the rest of the spine, because I'm bracing myself against the back of that chair, I'm not doing anything to promote good stability around those joints. And I'm also creating conditions where I'm going to be holding my spine rigid in order to produce more force by pushing against the thing. It's giving them more leverage. If you're using, I think that's the big distinction. I think that that bodybuilders, powerlifters sometimes have to use the spine to sort of like stabilize, get a little bit rigid so that they can produce more leverage and force.
Mm-hmm.
from that rigid position of the spine. Whereas what we need as singers is a lot of flexibility, because all these moving parts that we need for our larynx, in the cervical spine, all the moving parts
Mm-hmm.
we need throughout our ribs and torso that are attached to the rest of the spine needs to be able to respond to that
Yeah.
continually throughout performance.
Yeah. And even as you say it, I'm lengthening my spine just while I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I completely agree. And so, I mean, if I were to contribute, a list of, I know people love lists. People like to know, what should I be doing? What should I not be doing? Write me up my routine, right? Which
Yeah.
it's tricky, but yoga is a form of exercise that asks you to really stabilize your own weight against the floor, or really, I mean, the floor tends to be the ultimate support in that form. Or swimming is great, right? Because it's actually full body motion. And again, you're actually in a different environment in water. But of course, weight training can be fantastic as well, right? It's just about how you're doing what you're doing. And maybe that's often what I'm most interested in, is it's not about this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do. It's about how to do whatever you're choosing to do in a way that supports your goals. So is there anything else you would add to the list of, cardio you mentioned, of course.
Well, the thing that I like about weight training, and why I like to use that, is because it is prescriptive. I mean, there are good and bad things about that. A well-balanced yoga practice is certainly going to provide tremendous stability, strength, alignment, and it's great. And I think that singers benefit tremendously from yoga. Swimming is also fantastic. But if you've got a postural distortion that you really want to target, kinesiologists have gotten very, very good at just analyzing movement patterns and postures and coming up with a customized regimen that's going to maybe bring your body back into optimal alignment, maybe a little bit faster than if you were just doing a basic yoga practice. And there's no reason why you can't do both simultaneously. Right.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. And it also makes me think, going back to the idea of the alignment thing, something that I often say is that, the goal of the alignment, in fact, I love that you say that it's dynamic. The goal of alignment is not that we stand on stage and are in neutral, perfect alignment and rigidly move around the stage performing in, this rigid thing. We want to be dynamic and we want to be movable. So it's about finding a new home base for the body, is sometimes the way I like to describe it, so that we then can make choices from the new home base with less habit and tension attached to those choices, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I want to ask you about something very specific. I guess I'm sort of looping back to a part of a question that we've already touched on a little bit, but is there anything that singers or voice users should be avoiding in their fitness routine? And specifically, you and I have had a little bit of conversation previously about something called the Valsalva maneuver. So if you could explain that to people and talk a little bit about how that works and how we might want to approach that.
When considering sports-specific training, you have to really examine, what do you want the body to be able to do well? Because some exercises are going to optimize, movement and strength in a certain area that'll be really great for one sport, but not necessarily so great for another sport. And the same is true for singing. One of the things that is really important for singers is to avoid overdeveloping the upper trapezius muscle, right? The muscle that does this. If you elevate your shoulders, you're going to feel how that's going to sort of encroach on your neck and maybe limit range of motion for some of the things that are really important for your voice. That can take some coordination, because this sort of elevating shoulders movement is sometimes an instinctive thing that we do when we just breathe. But if you do that when you sing, there can be entanglement with all these muscles that you want to just keep nice and free so that your larynx can move the way that it needs to. The Valsalva maneuver is another thing that singers really need to guard against, in my opinion. It consists in valving off the glottis, right, so that you can then create more leverage. When you hear the gym rats grunting, they're valving off their throat, they're engaging the Valsalva maneuver, and it gives them more leverage to be able to lift more weight. And it's kind of controversial. Some trainers think this is a terrible thing. Some are finding new research that says, well, it's not as dangerous as we thought. But I personally feel that whatever it is you're training for, it's going to be more advantageous for you to stabilize your movement and get leverage through stabilizing your own core, rather than valving off the throat. When you valve off the glottis, you're actually engaging your vocal folds to do something other than what we need them to do as singers. And so I prefer to just save the vocal folds, to vibrate freely, to be the vibrator for this magnificent instrument that is housed in our body, rather than doing something to provide leverage for lifting when there are other ways that you could be doing it. A lot of singers have a tendency to over-adduct their vocal folds anyway. If you find somebody sort of like squeezing off their throat and pushing, then we need to free that up and improve technique there. So if then you go to the gym and you're valving off your throat to make yourself stronger, you're reinforcing this habit that you're trying to alleviate in the studio, and it's very counterproductive.
Yeah. I'll just add a little bit of thinking about it. I talk about this in How Your Voice Works. I talk about one of my favorite fun facts about the vocal cords is that, I mean, I don't actually know who sat around and decided how they should evolve, but presumably the way we think they evolved, right, is for two survival purposes before they ever were used for vocalizing, right? So the first survival purpose of the vocal cords, of course, is that they close off the airway. And if they close off the airway, that's good because that means that it can block things from going down into the lungs, which would be a very dire situation. So that's obviously very important, right? And then the second thing is when we do close our vocal cords, when we close off our airway, it, like you're describing, it valves our system. So it basically creates a blockage, a sphincter, if you will, between the outside world and the inside world, and we can maintain whatever air pressure is outside of us and whatever air pressure is inside of us. And so like you're saying, if we and hold at the vocal cords, right, then we can actually stabilize our core by having a lot of air pressure in our torso, in our lungs. And so is that a possible way to do that, and potentially maybe an important and effective skill for us to have as human beings? I think maybe it might be. But like you say, the third purpose of the vocal cords is to vibrate. And of course, the airflow has to go up through the trachea, through the vocal cords, in order to allow that to happen, which means the vocal cords actually have to be in an approximated position, right? They have to be approximately close together. They can't be closed really tightly together or they'll burst apart and we'll get what's called a glottal stop, right? Which is the thing that we're hearing the gym rats do.
Yeah.
And so just to, give people at home listening to this an opportunity to play with this on their own, I completely support what you're saying. If we have the vocal cords held tightly together to stabilize the core, does it work? Yes. Does it allow our throat to be free? And does it encourage habits of freedom and ease of movement up in the throat? Probably not, right? We can practice doing the Valsalva maneuver as efficiently and gently as possible, or we can just, like you say, use the core muscles. And I find that the easiest way to do that is to release a slow exhalation during the during the work, basically, as opposed to holding the vocal cords together. And so if people want to play with this, if they want to get curious about whether they're engaging the Valsalva maneuver and whether it might be causing excess tension in the throat and getting in the way of good singing habits or speaking habits, then they can play with releasing a long exhalation instead. Is that what you would recommend as well?
That's a great strategy.
Yeah.
That's a great strategy.
Yeah.
Something that I think about a lot, and I imagine that you do too, is that if you're a singer, you are a musical instrument, but your body is also there for other purposes. It's this big multitasking organism.
I sure hope so.
And a lot of the muscles that we need for singing evolved to do other things. And
yes.
A lot of the muscles that we need to engage in a more nuanced way for singing developed tremendous strength for other purposes that we really need them for. One example is that I forget what the actual number is, but the jaw is capable of exerting tremendous pressure. I mean, it evolved so that we could crunch up, raw meat and bone. Before we knew before we were foodies, before we knew how to cook and chop things up. But we don't need that level of jaw engagement for articulation.
Certainly not.
And so really just taking a step back and getting in touch with the jaw and getting a little more neuromuscular control over how much of that strength to deploy can take some doing. The muscles that adduct the vocal folds, that valve off the throat, they evolved to be able to do all these very important things that you've been describing. But actually engaging those adductor muscles when we sing, we don't have to do very much of that at all because the chords will just come together in response to the way that the air is moving.
Right.
Figuring out how much of that strength do you need to use for your singing. That's one of the really fine motor things that we need to develop. And if you're in the habit of going full throttle with those muscles when you're at the gym, then that's just going to make your job a little bit harder.
Right. Right. So, yeah, just agreeing with and reiterating what you're saying. So I like to teach voice and movement together, right? My business is called Voice Body Connection, right? I think they're very intimately connected. And when I am playing with all of this, I just find that I often find myself saying that the thesis of studying voice and movement together is that we're trying to figure out how to do the work that's necessary for the task at hand without doing excess work, right? We're trying to figure out, if the vocal folds need to approximate in order to be in the position to catch the wave of the airflow as it comes through the trachea, great, then we need to do the approximation. But we don't need to squeeze them together in order to get them to start vibrating, right? So it's just about finding that efficiency and that balance of effort. Mm-hmm. And I think if we take the idea of efficiency of effort, economy of effort, how much do I do and how much do I just let be? If we take this whole theory into our exercise routine, then we can be practicing the how of how we want to use our voice as we're doing our fitness work.
Totally agreed.
Yeah, I think we're just sitting here agreeing with each other.
Well, we want to make everybody's lives easier.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people don't know this stuff, I think that people, I think our society in general is locked in a pattern of work harder, accomplish more, right? Mm-hmm. Push harder, accomplish more. Sit at the, leg press machine, like you said, and press harder, and it will be good for me. And if we just start looking, and this is why I want to teach a class called How Your Voice Works in the first place, right? Because the theory is if you understand how something works, then you can use it more efficiently because you understand the machine, therefore we can put it together better. Sometimes I use the IKEA metaphor. If you look at those instructions, you can put together the shelf correctly. If you don't, good luck, right? Mm-hmm. So it's when we understand how we're doing the things and why we're doing the things we're doing, it's much easier for us to be selective and efficient about the best way to expend our effort.
Yeah, when you listen to a singer, that you're really enjoying and you just feel enveloped by their voice, one of the things that I think always characterizes that for most people is that it has this sense of effortlessness. Mm-hmm. And flow. Yes, they needed to build tremendous strength and coordination to be able to do that. But when singing is going well, there is this sense of just being in the moment and engaging and having it just sort of flow through you. So whereas if you see somebody who is like efforting, you're hearing a big impressive sound, but you can also see like what is taking them to do it, then you start, you might be impressed by the sound, but you're going to start feeling some of that effort in your own body. So how do we get to the point where we're not working so hard? I think a lot of the work that you're doing is helping people to cultivate awareness as to where they are working harder than they need to so that they can then choose not to.
Yeah. And I also, something that I talk about a lot is the difference between the rehearsal, the prep, the homework, if you will, and stepping into the present moment, right? And our fitness routine is part of our homework. It's an opportunity. It's not the moment that we're performing. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to sit and watch someone on the treadmill for 20 minutes. Yeah. They can do that on their own time. So if that's part of the homework, if that's part of our rehearsal, our prep, then it's fine for us to use our fitness routine as an opportunity to build awareness, to sort of go into left brain mode and get curious about, oh, this muscle's working right now. Maybe this one can let go and that one can, take over the effort because it's more efficient. So that's great. And then when we step onto the stage, we don't take our fitness routine, we don't take our homework with us. We just allow, that's the moment at which we, instead of favoring the doing, we favor the allowing and the being and the flow, right?
Exactly. And if I can take that back to the paradigm of sports-specific training, the same thing is true for athletes. There are the things that you do in the gym to optimize your body for peak performance at your sport. And then there's the training that you do on the field with your teammates. And then there's the actual engagement in the sport. If I'm a baseball player and I'm playing third base, I'm going to have to build up my chest muscles and my triceps and build a lot of explosive movement so that I can throw that ball really,
Right.
really far, like in the moment, in response to what's required of me. So I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do my push-ups and I'm going to do my triceps extensions and I'm going to do whatever else my trainer thinks I need to do to be able to build that coordination. But then when I'm out on the field, I'm not thinking about my push-ups.
Yeah. Good luck trying to play the
Yeah.
game if you're thinking about your push-ups, right?
I'm not
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, now I need to engage my pecs and my triceps and maybe put the ball over there, and it's already too late.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That's actually, just because it's so concrete, that's such a helpful thing to hear, because the other tricky thing about our voice is that the real vocal apparatus, I mean, our whole body really is the apparatus, isn't it? But the voice box, the little muscles around it, inside of it, the shape changes that happen in the throat, which are our resonance changes, even articulation, we can see some of it happening. We can see the lips, we can see the teeth, we can see the tip of the tongue moving. But so much of what's happening, so much of the changes that are happening in here, the adjustments, we can't see them, right?
Right.
So it's not even as easy as to be like, cool, I engage my pec, I engage my rhomboid, etc. We can't see that happening so readily on the outside of us. And so that's another, maybe even just more reason that it's important for us to keep doing our fitness routine in a way that helps us gain deeper awareness of where we're feeling tension, where we're feeling engagement, and where we're feeling release. I mean, we can remind ourselves that muscles do two things, ultimately. They tense and they release. They contract and they release. That's all a muscle really does, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can feel when things are contracting and releasing, and if we can tease apart things that like to all contract together when actually that's maybe not the most efficient way in our fitness routine, then we can, it'll just bleed its way into the way that we're using our vocal apparatus, I think.
True. It's important to remember that a lot of these little muscles that do so much of the work of singing, we get very little sensory feedback.
Yeah.
Those muscles. There just are not a lot of sensory nerve endings. If I'm training my pecs or my triceps, those muscles are giving me a lot of feedback in terms of like, are they sore? Are they working well? Do they feel good? Are they moving more? Are they moving less? Whereas I'm not going to get feedback like that from my vocal folds. I'm not even going to get feedback like that from my diaphragm.
Right.
And so the kind of kinesthetic awareness that that movement training, that yoga can really provide is essential for singers.
So we can at least pick up on whatever feedback is there, even though it's small.
Exactly.
Or the stuff that's moving around it that lets us know that it's moving or that it's released.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything you'd like to add? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. This has been great. But is there anything you want to add about things people need to know about fitness and their interaction of their fitness routine and voice?
I guess the only thing I'd like to say is that if fitness is something that that you've never done before, if like me, you maybe had not the best experience with gym class or fitness training when you were younger, it's such a fantastic tool, and I encourage you to just explore whatever it is that your body needs in terms of movement, and start where you are. It's never too late to start exploring your body and bringing things into balance and improving your overall level of fitness. People think that fitness is for losing weight or for looking good naked. And there's so much information that we get from the media about what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it and what your goals ought to be. But if you can really just tune into your own body and start thinking about, like, what do I want so that I can feel good? What do I want so that I can move more expansively? Then you're going to find a nice inroad into how to start, how much to do, and who knows where it will go. Fitness has been a really, really rewarding journey for me. And I definitely started out as the kid who would get picked last for the basketball team, was totally traumatized by gymnastics class. So I find it tremendously valuable, and I invite all of you to explore fitness materials and come to them on your own terms.
That is such a beautiful note to end on. And you know what it makes me think of too is what you're doing is really wonderful and in some ways revolutionary. There's that sort of long-held stereotype that opera singers shouldn't exercise, right?
Yeah.
That doing doing any sort of fitness routine will interfere with the freedom of the voice. And so, for you to be sitting here and embodying and sharing this idea that of course we can be healthy bodies, and by having healthy bodies, it actually supports our voice if we're just really conscientious about how we're doing it, so that it truly is supportive. That's wonderful. I'm so glad to have that message as part of what we're doing. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for getting together this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day, Claudia.
You too.
Bye.